Ben, thanks for joining us. Yeah, your take on this. What's the score? I mean, he says that but Rwanda scheme is not the be-all and end-all. Well, let's remember that at the end of this scheme, if it ever happens, on the unlikely event it ever happens, we'll be sending maybe 200, maximum 500 migrants to Rwanda. We've got about 170,000 in this country alone. So it was always not the be-all and end-all, wasn't it? So why are they all up in arms at James cleverly announcing what is the truth?
It's the politics of distraction, isn't it, Kevin? Rwanda was never, ever going to work. Even if they had got it across the line and the plane had taken off and hundreds of people were being flown out to Rwanda, as you rightly pointed out, the proportion of those entering the country that risked being deported is so low that it would not act as a discouragement from those who've made already a very big, expensive, dangerous journey to get here. The idea that if there's a small chance of being deported, you're suddenly going to stop your efforts to reach our very generous economic shores is for the birds, frankly. And Rwanda was always a red herring. And Alex will be very familiar with this from her time in politics, which continues. And, you know, it's the politics of distraction. Focus here while we do absolutely nothing in substance. And the reality is there's only one way to stop the boats, as we've discussed before, and that is to actually stop the boats, which is to use our border force to do what they're employed to do and enforce our borders, control our borders, stop them at the point that they seek to enter our territorial waters, send them back to France where they came from.
Yeah, I mean, I've always thought this Rwanda plan is just a scheme to blame everybody else but themselves and be able to point in the direction of left-wing lawyers, NGOs, whoever they fancy. Absolutely. To shoulder responsibility. And on that, one of their favourite people to point their fingers at, of course, are the unelected European judges in Strasbourg. And yet here we go. We heard the Conservative Party back when the Lisbon Treaty was being ratified, something we were never supposed to do, according to David Cameron, our new Foreign Secretary, saying, well, we've got to leave the ECHR. I mean, wind the clock forward well over a decade. The debate's still rumbling on, and now Cleverly's wading in, saying, no, we shouldn't leave the ECHR because that's going to undermine things. I mean, what is it?
I know. Well, Cleverly's actually been on the record saying that we shouldn't leave the ECHR before he was made Home Secretary. So he's always going to be a bit weak on the subject. I mean, I think we should leave the ECHR irrespective of Rwanda. That body has no political or third-party scrutiny. It is what they call an independent body for which read unaccountable, like so many of the other supranational institutions to which our government has handed over democratic authority. And it's completely wrong. So we should be leaving the ECHR irrespective of Rwanda. But even Suella Braverman made the point quite clearly that you don't need to leave the ECHR to make Rwanda work if that is what you wish to do. All you need to do is to have carve-outs for the provisions in the ECHR. So you need language in the Illegal Migration Act, which basically says, notwithstanding the effect of the European Convention of Human Rights, we're going to do X, Y, and Z, which isn't leaving the ECHR, but actually just carving out areas which domestic policy and domestic law will reign supreme. That could easily have been done, but they didn't do it. This is not a government that genuinely wishes to tackle the boat. And as you said, Alex, they're just going to find everyone and all and sundry to blame for their failure to do it and let the problem rumble on.
And Suella Braverman, the former Home Secretary, of course, today is saying that Rishi reneged on a number of promises he made her, which were with a view to solving the migrant crisis. We interviewed someone last week who I thought came up with the best answer ever for why this government doesn't seem to be able to tackle the boat crisis, the migrant crisis. He said, because they don't want to.
Yeah, they don't. I mean, they're practicing an economic Ponzi scheme. GDP is under real pressure. Our labor markets are broken. And the only way, again, that they can create the optics of the economy not completely collapsing is by taking in more and more people. But of course, that's a downward spiral into economic collapse. You know, the more people you take on, the more housing you need, the more pressure there is on infrastructure, the more pressure on our NHS. And once you may prop up GDP per capita or GDP per hour worked is collapsing. And remember, the figures of 740,000 net last year and 670,000 net this year, they're net figures. In gross terms, we've taken on 3.5 million immigrants into the country over the last 3 years. That's 5% of the British population has been recycled. And we've lost from the country about 1.5 million Brits. And I can bet you my bottom dollar that those of whom we've lost are highly skilled and have gone abroad to find avenues of growth for their own career, where they're taxed less, where they can make more money, where the economies are growing. And you're beginning to see the doom loop unfolding with this sticker tape approach to managing the economy and a complete disregard for the social fabric of the country. This country is not, this government is not fit for purpose. They've got no interest, no ability, no vision to solve the problem. And they're going to go round and round on the same issues, taking in more and more migrants in the hope that something comes along around the corner to rescue them. But it won't. What they've got to understand is that we can only get out of the hole in which we're in by growing the economy. You can only grow the economy if you deregulate and cut taxes. You have to do it. And if you grow the economy, wages will rise. And if taxes reduce, British people will work. There's less need for migration, less pressure on infrastructure, less pressure on housing, and the economic machine begins to right itself. But we have a socialist government that has no vision like that for the United Kingdom.